Ugh, there's nothing to eat. Still nothing. Ugh, I'm so hungry.
The Great Famine was a mass starvation in most of Europe, wiping out 25% of the population, aka 2 million people. The causes of the Great Famine were due to crop failure or harvest shortfalls, and this was due to bad weather such as a lot of rain and cooler weather, simply making it harder for the crops to grow. Because they couldn't eat the crops that they would usually eat, they resulted to edible roots, plants, grasses, nuts, bark, draft animals, which were animals they used for milk, eggs, etc., and, in extreme cases, at the peak of the famine, cannibalism. Those who didn't grow crops couldn't buy any wheat products because the prices rose about 300% in parts of Europe. At this point, all the classes were suffering, but the lower classes suffered the most. The lower classes were called peasants, and they made up 95% of the population. However, even the King of England, Edward II, stopped insane albums and he was unable to obtain any bread. The elderly would often starve themselves to death to give younger generations a chance to live and farm. While the elderly were killing themselves, the infants were involuntarily doing the same. Mothers, fathers, or any caretakers would kill babies and infants in a process called infanticide, simply to save mouths to feed, or keep their children from living in a future with no food. Adults would also often abandon their children in the woods for the same reason they would kill infants. It is one less mouth to feed. However, those who were alive during the famine usually only made it to the ages of 30 to 35, and during the Black Death, the age of 17. The story Hansel and Gretel is a tale of two kids abandoned in the woods by their father because he did not have enough food for them. Sound familiar? That's because Hansel and Gretel was actually derived from the Great Famine. Another folktale that was inspired by the Great Famine was the story The Mouse Tower of Bingen. This story is about a prince who was greedy and took all of the food in the kingdom and locked it in his tower where he lived. However, he started to hear weird noises and he looked outside to see starving rats and mice coming for his food. Another aspect that played into the Great Famine was the churches. During this time, people would often turn to the churches for salvation and comfort. But because the church could not change the weather and this was out of their control, the people started to question the church's power. The Great Famine officially ended in 1317, because that's when the weather patterns returned to normal and they could grow crops again. However, it wasn't until the year 1325 that the food supply had gone back to a normal state and the population began to increase again.